The afternoon sun was beating down hard on the asphalt, turning the massive grocery store parking lot into an oven. It was the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer in the distance and makes the metal of car doors burn to the touch. Most people were rushing to get out of it, heads down, marching toward the automatic sliding doors to get into the air conditioning. But in the middle of all this rush and heat, there was one man who was moving in a completely different rhythm. He was 90 years old, though to look at him, you might think he was even older. His skin was deeply wrinkled, mapped with the lines of a long, hard life, and he was so thin that his clothes hung loosely off his shoulders. He wore a faded, old baseball cap that had seen better decades and a pair of worn-out shoes that looked like they were held together by sheer willpower. He wasn't there to shop. He was there to work. At 90 years old, most people are sitting in rocking chairs or resting in living rooms, but this man was pushing a long line of heavy, metal shopping carts. It was a difficult job for a young, strong person, but for him, it was a battle. He was collecting the carts that lazy shoppers had left scattered all over the lot. There were ones near the curb, ones blocking parking spots, and ones left rolling dangerously toward other cars. His job was to gather them all and push them back to the front of the store. He gripped the handle of the cart in front of him. His hands were rough and shaky, the knuckles swollen from arthritis. He took a deep breath, leaning his weight into the metal frame to get it moving. The wheels made a loud, screeching sound against the rough pavement. It wasn't just one cart, he had hooked 5 or 6 of them together. The weight was immense. It pulled at his shoulders and sent a sharp pain shooting through his lower back, a pain he had learned to live with but never really got used to. As he pushed the line of carts across the blacktop, the sweat began to pour down his face. It dripped off the end of his nose and stung his eyes, but he didn't stop to wipe it away. He couldn't. If he let go, even for a second, the heavy row of carts might roll backward or crash into a parked car. He moved one slow, heavy step at a time. His legs trembled slightly with every movement, his knees clicking audibly. It was heartbreaking to watch, yet strangely mesmerizing. There was a quiet dignity in the way he fought against the weight, refusing to give up. Around him, life moved at a speed he couldn't match anymore. Cars zoomed down the lanes, looking for spots. A young mother pushed a stroller, looking at her phone. A group of teenagers laughed loudly as they walked past, not even noticing the old man struggling just a few feet away. They were in their own worlds, wrapped up in their own problems and their own days. To them, he was invisible. He was just part of the background scenery of the parking lot, like the light poles or the painted lines on the ground. Nobody seemed to ask themselves why a 90-year-old man was doing this hard labor. Nobody stopped to ask if he was okay or if he needed a break. He was alone in the crowd. The silence of his struggle was louder than the noise of the traffic. He kept his eyes fixed on the ground, watching for cracks in the pavement that could trip him up or stop the wheels of the carts. He couldn't afford to fall. At his age, a fall could be the end. When he finally reached the cart return station near the store entrance, he let out a long, shaky breath. He hadn't realized he was holding it in. He disconnected the carts one by one, the metal clanking loudly in the quiet space between the parked cars. He did it slowly, carefully. He didn't want to scratch the paint on the carts or make too much noise. He took a moment to lean against the side of the cart bay, his chest heaving slightly. His heart was beating fast, hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He reached into his pocket with a trembling hand and pulled out a small, crumpled receipt. He stared at it for a moment. It was his tally for the hour. He knew that for this hard work, For risking his health in the blazing sun, he would barely earn enough to buy a loaf of bread and maybe a small tin of soup. It wasn't about getting rich. It was about surviving. It was about not going to bed with an empty stomach. The simple shame of that reality stung more than the sunburn on his neck. He looked toward the store entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see the air-conditioned interior. He could see the aisles full of food, fresh fruits, vegetables, roasting chickens, and shelves stacked with everything a person could ever want. The smell of baked bread drifted out through the cracks in the doors, making his stomach rumble loudly. He was hungry. It was a deep, hollow kind of hunger that sits in your chest and makes you feel weak. But he didn't go inside yet. He couldn't. He had to go back out. He adjusted his cap, pulling the brim down low to shade his eyes. He turned away from the promise of the grocery store and looked back out at the vast, hot parking lot. There were more carts out there. They were waiting for him. If he didn't collect them, someone else would, or maybe they would just sit there, cluttering the lot. He felt a sense of responsibility, even if no one else saw it. He wiped his hands on his trousers, trying to dry the sweat that made his grip slippery. He squared his shoulders, trying to look stronger than he felt. He started the long walk back across the lot to find the next stray cart. The asphalt radiated heat up through the soles of his thin shoes. His feet throbbed with every step. A car drove past him quickly, the driver not even looking, forcing him to stumble slightly to the side to avoid the side mirror. He didn't get angry. He didn't shout, he just steadied himself and kept walking. He was used to being the one who moved out of the way. He was used to being the one who didn't matter. As he reached the far end of the lot, far away from the safety of the store entrance, he spotted a cart all by itself near a patch of dry, yellow grass. It looked lonely, just like him. He walked toward it, his pace getting slower and slower. The energy was draining out of him faster than he could replace it. He felt dizzy for a moment, the world spinning slightly at the edges. He stopped and closed his eyes, taking a few deep breaths until the feeling passed. He knew he should stop. He knew he was too old for this. But the thought of going home empty-handed was worse than the pain in his legs. He reached out, his hand wrapping around the warm, plastic-coated metal handle of the cart. He gripped it tight. This was his life. This was his reality. And with a heavy sigh, he began the long, slow push back toward the store, wondering if today would be the day someone actually saw him. The sun was still high in the sky, refusing to let up as the afternoon wore on. The heat radiated off the pavement in waves, making the air shimmer and dance. For most people, this was just an annoying Tuesday, a day to run errands and get back to the comfort of air conditioning. But for the 90-year-old man, it was a battle against his own body and the elements. He stood near the entrance of the store, taking a rare moment of stillness. His hand gripped the handle of a shopping cart tightly, not because he was moving it, but because he needed it to hold himself up. Through the big, bright glass windows of the supermarket, he could see a completely different world. It was cool and bright inside. The fluorescent lights made everything look clean and perfect. He watched people walking down the aisles, casually picking up items. He saw a young man in a sharp suit dropping an expensive bottle of wine into his cart without even looking at the price tag. He saw a woman picking up a bouquet of fresh, bright flowers. They moved with ease, their faces relaxed, their biggest worry being what to cook for dinner. It was a world of abundance, a world where food was so plentiful it was just background noise. For the old man, looking through that glass felt like looking at a movie he wasn't a part of. His stomach gave a painful, twisting growl, but he ignored it. He adjusted his worn-out cap and looked down at his shoes. The toes were scuffed, and the soles were worn thin. He thought about the few coins in his pocket. It wasn't enough for the wine. It wasn't enough for the flowers. It might not even be enough for the fresh bread he saw in the bakery section. The prices of everything had gone up so much over the years. He remembered when $1 could buy a week's worth of groceries, but those days were long gone. Now, $1 felt like nothing, just a small piece of metal that couldn't even buy a bottle of water. He felt a deep sense of isolation standing there. Even though he was surrounded by dozens of people, he was entirely alone. A stream of shoppers pushed past him, exiting the store with overflowing baskets. They were chatting on their phones, laughing with friends, or scolding their children. Nobody looked down. Nobody noticed the old man struggling to stand. To them, he was just another fixture of the parking lot, like the concrete pillars or the trash cans. He had become invisible because he was old and he was poor. It was a harsh reality, but one he had come to accept. He took up no space, made no noise, and asked for nothing, so the world simply moved around him. A luxury car rolled by slowly, looking for a parking spot. The windows were tinted black, hiding the driver inside. The car crept toward the crosswalk where the old man was standing. It didn't stop. It just kept inching forward, forcing him to shuffle backward quickly to avoid being hit. He stumbled slightly, his bad knee flaring up with a sharp jolt of pain. The car eventually zoomed past to find a spot, the driver never rolling down a window to apologize or check on him. The old man just steadied himself and nodded. It was okay. He was used to being in the way. He was used to moving for others. He knew he couldn't stand there and feel sorry for himself. He had a job to do, however small. He took a deep breath, tasting the dust and exhaust fumes of the parking lot, and turned his back on the comfort of the store. He scanned the asphalt. There were carts everywhere. They were scattered like wild animals, far from their pens. Some were left in the middle of parking spaces, blocking people from parking. Some were left on the grassy median near the road. It was a mess, and it was his job to fix it. He walked slowly toward a cluster of 3 carts near the back of the lot. Every step was a calculated effort. He lifted his feet high to avoid tripping on the uneven ground. His balance wasn't what it used to be, and a fall now could be disastrous. He reached the carts and began the process of hooking them together. This was harder than it looked. The metal latch was stiff and rusty sometimes. He had to use both hands to force the cart in front to lock onto the cart behind. His fingers ached with the pressure, but he didn't stop until he heard the satisfying clink of the metal connecting. He gathered a few more, building a train. 1 cart, 2 carts, 3, 4, 5. By the time he had 6 carts hooked together, the weight was tremendous. It wasn't just dead weight, the carts were awkward. They wobbled, they pulled to the left, and the wheels squealed in protest. He stood at the front of the line, looking like a captain steering a heavy ship against a strong current. He wiped his palms on his pants to get rid of the sweat. If his hands were wet, he might slip, and if he slipped, he would go down. A group of teenagers walked past him, loud and full of energy. They were eating ice cream cones, joking loudly about something that happened at school. One of them accidentally bumped into the back of his train of carts, shaking them violently. The impact jarred the old man's shoulders, sending a spasm of pain down his spine. He winced, biting his lip to keep from crying out. The teenagers didn't even stop. They didn't say excuse me or sorry. They just kept walking, their laughter fading as they moved toward their car. The old man watched them go. He didn't feel anger, just a tired sadness. He wondered if they realized how lucky they were to have strong bodies and full stomachs. He tightened his grip on the rubber handle of the lead cart. He leaned forward, putting his shoulder into the task. "Come on," he whispered to himself, his voice raspy and dry. He pushed with his legs. For a moment, the heavy wall of metal refused to move. It felt like it was cemented to the ground. He grunted, exerting every bit of strength he had left in his fragile frame. Slowly, inch by inch, the train of carts began to roll. The movement started a chain reaction in his body. His lower back throbbed with a dull, constant ache that sharpened every time he hit a crack in the pavement. His breath came in short, ragged gasps. He was moving so slowly that a snail could have passed him. But he was moving. That was the important thing. He pushed the carts across the vast expanse of the parking lot, a solitary figure fighting against the weight of the world. People drove past him, their engines roaring. Some honked at other cars, the noise startling him. He kept his head down, focused on the white lines of the crosswalk ahead. He had to navigate this heavy, clumsy load through the maze of parked cars without scratching any of them. If he scratched a car, he couldn't pay for the damage. That thought terrified him. The idea of causing trouble, of costing someone money, kept him hyper-focused. He steered carefully, weaving the long line of carts with a precision that defied his age. He was about halfway to the store entrance when the exhaustion hit him hard. It wasn't just physical tiredness, it was a deep, bone weariness that comes from a lifetime of hard work. He felt lightheaded. The heat was oppressive now, pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. He wanted to just let go. He wanted to sit down on the curb and close his eyes. But he couldn't. If he stopped now, he wouldn't be able to get them moving again. The momentum was the only thing keeping him going. He looked up at the store entrance. It seemed so far away. The sliding doors opened and closed, letting out blasts of cool air that teased him from a distance. He saw a store manager standing inside, wearing a clean shirt and looking at a clipboard. The old man wondered if the manager knew how hard this was. He wondered if anyone cared that a 90-year-old man was out here breaking his back just to eat. Probably not. It was easier not to care. It was easier to look away. He adjusted his grip one last time. His knuckles were white, the veins popping out on his thin hands. He gritted his teeth and pushed. The wheels rattled loudly over a speed bump, shaking his entire body. He coughed, a dry, hacking cough that echoed in the empty space between the cars. He spit onto the ground, wiped his mouth, and kept going. Step by step. Push by push. He was almost there. He just had to hold on for a little longer. He was alone in the crowd, silent and struggling, praying that he would make it to the corral before his strength gave out completely. The struggle was reaching its breaking point. The 90-year-old man was just a few yards away from the cart return bay, but it felt like miles. The sweat was now pouring into his eyes, stinging them so badly he could barely see. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear his vision, but the blur remained. The train of 6 carts seemed to get heavier with every second, like they were filled with lead instead of being empty metal shells. His breath was coming in short, wheezing gasps. It sounded like a rusty pump trying to move air through a clogged filter. He knew he couldn't stop. If he stopped now, his trembling legs might give out completely, and he would collapse right there on the hot asphalt. He gritted his teeth, letting out a low, guttural groan as he summoned the last of his strength. He shoved the heavy line of carts forward. The wheels hit the edge of the concrete sidewalk that bordered the storefront. The impact jarred his entire upper body. The pain shot through his shoulders and down his spine, sharp and biting. He almost lost his grip. The handle slipped in his wet hands, scraping the skin off his palm. He didn't let go, though. He held on tighter, his knuckles turning white, ignoring the sting of the fresh scrape. With a final, Herculean effort, he pushed the carts up over the curb and onto the smoother concrete. The relief was instant, but so was the exhaustion. He felt dizzy, the ground tilting underneath him. He leaned heavily against the side of the cart bay, his chest heaving. He was safe. He had made it. But as he stood there, trying to catch his breath and stop the world from spinning, he didn't feel proud. He just felt tired. Deeply, overwhelmingly tired. He looked at his hands, shaking uncontrollably in front of him. He wondered, not for the first time that day, how much longer he could keep doing this. How many more hot afternoons could his body survive while he was catching his breath? The world around him continued to move. A sleek, dark car pulled into the parking spot right next to where he was standing. It was a nice car, quiet and expensive, but it blended in with the other expensive cars in the lot. The engine turned off, but the old man didn't pay any attention. He was used to cars parking next to him. He was used to doors opening and people stepping out. He just wanted to disappear for a moment, to rest without being in anyone's way. The driver's door of the car opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He looked like an ordinary guy trying to run a few errands. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder and a calm, quiet energy about him. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't rushing. He just closed his door gently, locked it, and turned toward the store entrance. If this had been anyone else, they would have walked right past. They would have seen the old man as an obstacle, something to steer around to get to the automatic doors. But this man stopped. He took 2 steps and then froze. He had looked up from the ground and his eyes had landed on the old man leaning against the carts. The stranger stood there for a moment, just watching. He saw the heavy, rattling line of carts. He saw the old man's heaving chest. He saw the sweat soaking through the thin fabric of the old man's shirt. He noticed the way the old man's hands were trembling violently against his sides. Most importantly, he saw the exhaustion on the old man's face, the kind of exhaustion that goes beyond just being tired, the kind that comes from a hard life. The stranger didn't look away. He didn't check his watch or look for an opening in the traffic to dodge past. Instead, a look of serious concern washed over his face. His eyebrows furrowed slightly. It was a human reaction, raw and immediate. He seemed to be processing what he was seeing. It didn't make sense to him. He saw someone who should be enjoying his retirement, someone who deserved to be resting, breaking his back for pennies while everyone else ignored him. The old man finally sensed that someone was standing close by. He pushed himself off the cart bay, standing up as straight as he could manage. He wiped his face on his sleeve again, trying to look presentable, trying to look like he wasn't on the verge of collapse. He didn't look up at the stranger's face. He kept his eyes down, staring at the man's shoes. He was used to being scolded by managers or complained to by customers. He braced himself for it. He thought the man was going to ask him to move the cart so he could get through, or maybe tell him that he was blocking the sidewalk. "I'm sorry," the old man muttered, his voice raspy and weak. I'm moving them. Just give me a minute. He reached out to grab the handle of the carts again to push them into their slots, even though his arms felt like jelly. The stranger didn't say a word. He didn't tell the old man to hurry. He didn't complain. Instead, he took a step closer, cutting off the distance between them. The old man flinched slightly, surprised by the movement. He expected the man to walk around him. But the stranger wasn't going around. He was walking right up to the front of the line of carts. The atmosphere in the busy parking lot seemed to shift. The rushing cars and the chatting pedestrians faded into the background noise. The focus narrowed down to these two figures. On one side, the 90-year-old man, frail, worn out, and expecting rejection. On the other side, the stranger, tall, strong, and radiating a strange kind of calmness. It was like a scene from a movie where the music stops and the camera zooms in, except this was real life. There were no cameras, no directors, and no scripts. The stranger reached the handle of the lead cart before the old man could. He saw the old man's shaking hand reaching for it and gently moved past it. He wrapped his own hand around the rubber grip. His hand was large and tanned, covering the metal completely. He didn't grab it aggressively, he took it with a firm, careful grip, as if he were handling something precious. The old man looked up, confused. He froze with his hand hovering in mid-air. He finally saw the stranger's face. He saw the kindness in the man's eyes, a stark contrast to the indifference he had seen all day. There was no judgment there. There was no annoyance. Just a quiet, steady determination. The old man didn't recognize the actor from the movies. He didn't see a celebrity. He just saw a man who was stepping in to help. But the change in energy was undeniable. For the first time in hours, the old man wasn't fighting the weight alone. The stranger didn't ask for permission. He didn't make a big speech. He simply planted his feet firmly on the concrete and pulled the heavy line of carts toward himself, taking the full weight of the load. He transferred the burden from the old man's fragile shoulders to his own strong back. The metal wheels squeaked slightly as the weight shifted. The stranger looked at the old man and gave him a small, reassuring nod. It was a simple gesture, but it said everything. It said, "I've got this. You don't have to do this anymore." The old man stood there, stunned. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He looked at the stranger, then at the carts, then back at the stranger. He couldn't understand why a stranger would want to touch the dirty, sweaty handles of carts he had been pushing all day. He couldn't understand why someone would stop their own day to help a nobody like him. But the stranger just stood there, holding the carts, waiting patiently. He wasn't looking for a thank you. He wasn't looking for attention. He was just looking to make things a little bit easier for a fellow human being who was struggling. As the initial shock began to fade, the old man felt a lump form in his throat, and for the first time that day, his eyes weren't stinging just from the sweat. The heavy metal carts, which just moments ago had felt like an immovable stone wall to the 90-year-old man, began to glide smoothly across the concrete. The stranger held the handle with one hand, guiding the long train of carts as if they were weightless. The squeaking of the rusty wheels seemed to quiet down under his steady control. The old man stood frozen for a second, his hands still hovering in the air, half reaching for nothing. He watched the stranger's back as he walked the carts the final few feet to the return stall. It was a strange sight to see someone else doing his work, doing it so easily. The stranger didn't rush, but he moved with a purposeful stride that made the difficult look simple. The old man quickly shook off his paralysis and shuffled after him. He felt a mix of relief and embarrassment. He didn't want people to think he was so weak that he needed charity, or that he was trying to get attention. "Wait, sir," he called out, his voice raspy. "You don't have to do that. I can manage." It was a lie, and they both knew it, but it was a matter of pride. He reached the cart corral just as the stranger was pushing the last cart into place. The stranger didn't stop to argue. He just lined up the carts neatly, ensuring the wheels were locked and they wouldn't roll back out. He treated the dirty, dented metal with respect. When he was finished, he turned to face the old man. Up close, the old man could see the sincerity in the stranger's eyes. There was no look of pity, which the old man hated. Pity made you feel small. Instead, there was a look of genuine concern, as if the stranger was seeing a friend who needed help. "It's hot today," the stranger said simply. His voice was low and calm, cutting through the noise of the traffic. "These things get heavy when it's this hot." The old man nodded, wiping his sweaty forehead with the back of his shaking hand. "Yes, sir. It is. But I'm okay. I appreciate the help, really." He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. He felt he should move on, go find more carts, or just disappear. He felt exposed standing next to this man who looked so healthy and strong. The stranger didn't walk away, though. He stood there, looking at the old man's hands. He saw the red, raw skin, the swollen joints, and the dirt ingrained in the creases. He saw the old man's worn-out clothes and the way his body slumped from exhaustion. The stranger seemed to be making a decision. He shifted his backpack on his shoulder and reached into the pocket of his jeans. The old man watched, confused. He thought maybe the man was getting his car keys or a phone to make a call. But when the stranger pulled his hand out, he was holding a thick stack of cash. It wasn't just a single dollar bill or some loose change. It was a folded wad of bills, mostly 20s and 50s. The old man's eyes went wide. He took a small, instinctive step backward, shaking his head. "Oh no," he said quickly, holding up his hands as if to shield himself. "No, sir. I can't take that. I was just doing my job. You helped me with the carts, and that is enough. I don't need money." He had been offered money before, usually by people who wanted to feel good about themselves, but rarely this much. And usually, he refused. He wanted to earn his way, even if it was just a few coins at a time. Taking money felt like admitting defeat, like admitting that he couldn't take care of himself anymore. The stranger stepped forward, closing the small gap between them. He didn't say anything at first. He just reached out and gently took the old man's hand. The stranger's hand was warm and dry. He pressed the folded money firmly into the old man's palm, closing the old man's fingers over it with a grip that was gentle but impossible to pull away from. "Please," the stranger said. His tone wasn't commanding, but it was firm. It was the kind of voice you listen to. "Take it." I can't," the old man stammered, looking down at the money in his hand. It felt like a burning coal. It was more money than he had seen in months. "It's too much. I haven't done anything to deserve this." "You're working hard," the stranger replied. He looked the old man right in the eyes, his gaze unwavering. "You're out here in the heat, working hard. That deserves respect. And you need a break. Today, take a break." The old man looked at the stack of bills, then back at the stranger. The reality of the situation started to sink in. With this money, He wouldn't have to worry about food for weeks. He could buy proper groceries, maybe even a new pair of shoes that didn't hurt his feet. He could rest for a day without the gnawing fear of where his next meal was coming from. The lump in his throat grew bigger, choking off his words. Tears welled up in his eyes, spilling over and running down his cheeks, cutting tracks through the layer of dust and sweat. "Thank you," the old man whispered. His voice broke. "Thank you so much. God bless you." The stranger smiled. It was a soft, humble smile that didn't ask for anything in return. He reached out and placed a hand on the old man's shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. The weight of the hand felt grounding. "You take care of yourself, all right," the stranger said. He didn't ask for the old man's name. He didn't tell him his own name. He didn't pull out a phone to record the moment or tell his friends about what he had done. He just squeezed the old man's shoulder one last time and gave a small nod. Then, the stranger turned around. He put his hands back in his pockets and began walking toward the store entrance, leaving the old man standing by the cart corral with a fortune in his hand. The old man watched him go. He watched the stranger blend back into the crowd of shoppers, just another person in a parking lot, except he wasn't. To the old man, he was an angel disguised in a jacket and jeans. The old man looked down at his hand again. He opened his fingers slowly, as if afraid the money might vanish into thin air. It was real. He quickly stuffed it deep into his pocket, patting it to make sure it was safe. The air felt different now. The heat didn't seem so oppressive. The weight on his shoulders was gone, replaced by a lightness he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just an invisible old man pushing carts anymore. Someone had seen him. Someone had cared. He took a deep breath, the deepest one he had taken all day. He stood up straighter, feeling a surge of energy return to his limbs. The pain in his back was still there, but it seemed distant now, unimportant. He looked toward the store doors, watching the stranger disappear inside. The old man didn't go back to work immediately. For the first time in a long time, he didn't have to. He could just stand there in the sun and breathe, knowing that today, things were going to be okay. The stranger walked away without looking back, his figure quickly dissolving into the steady stream of shoppers entering the store. There was no dramatic wave, no final goodbye. He just became another person in the crowd, indistinguishable from anyone else. That was the most amazing part about it. He didn't want credit. He didn't want a round of applause. He saw a need, he filled it, and he moved on. The old man stood alone by the cart return, the only evidence of the encounter being the thick wad of cash tucked securely into his pocket. The parking lot was just as noisy, just as hot, and just as busy as it was 5 minutes ago, but for the old man, the world had completely stopped spinning. He stood there for a long time, letting the reality of the moment wash over him. The heavy, suffocating blanket of despair that had been weighing him down all day was gone. In its place was a strange, light feeling in his chest. It felt like hope. For the first time in years, he wasn't worried about the next hour. He wasn't worried about how many carts he could push before his back gave out. He wasn't worried about the empty shelves at home. He took a deep breath, and for the first time that day, the air actually tasted sweet. He patted his pocket again, feeling the outline of the bills. It was a lifeline, thrown to him just as he was about to go under for the last time. The old man looked at his hands. They were still dirty, still shaking, and still covered in the grime of hard labor. But when he looked at them now, he didn't see useless tools. He saw the hands that had survived. He decided right then that he was done pushing carts for the day. The job wasn't finished, and the lot wasn't clean, but his shift was over. He had permission to rest, given to him by a stranger who seemed to care more about his well-being than he did himself. He turned away from the cart corral and faced the grocery store. For so long, those automatic glass doors had been a barrier. They were the gateway to a world of abundance that he was allowed to look at but not fully participate in. He had always been on the outside, looking in, separated by a wall of glass and a lack of money. Today, he walked toward those doors with his head held high. The sensors picked up his movement, and the doors slid open with a soft whoosh. A blast of freezing cold air hit him, raising goosebumps on his arms. It felt incredible. The smell of the store engulfed him, the scent of fresh brewed coffee, the sweet aroma of donuts and cakes from the bakery, and the savory smell of rotisserie chicken. It was the smell of life. He walked past the greeters, usually invisible to them as they focused on the real customers. But today, he walked with a different stride. He didn't shuffle, he stepped. He grabbed a shopping basket from the stack, the plastic handles cool against his fingers. He walked down the aisle slowly, not because he was tired, but because he wanted to enjoy it. He looked at the shelves with new eyes. Usually, his eyes were drawn to the bright orange discount stickers, the half-off bread, or the dented cans. He bought what was cheapest, not what he wanted. But today, he walked down the produce section. He stopped in front of the apples. They were red, shiny, and perfect. He reached out and touched one, feeling its smooth skin. He picked two of them up and placed them gently into his basket. He moved to the meat section. He saw the fresh cuts of beef and the whole chickens roasting under warm lights. He remembered the stranger's words, "Take a break." He selected a container of potato salad and a roasted chicken. It was still warm. The warmth radiated through the plastic container and into his hand. It was a small thing, but holding that warm food felt like holding a treasure. He walked through the store with a full basket, feeling the weight of it, but it was a good weight. It was the weight of security. People brushed past him in the aisles, busy moms on phones, business people in suits, teenagers laughing. They still didn't really see him. To them, he was just a 90-year-old man in old clothes buying groceries. He was still invisible in that sense. But the difference was that he didn't feel invisible anymore. He carried a secret with him, a memory of kindness that acted like a suit of armor. He knew that human connection was real. He knew that compassion existed. It didn't matter that the crowds ignored him, because one person hadn't. One person had stopped. One person had seen him. He made his way to the checkout counter. He placed his items on the belt: the apples, the chicken, the potato salad, a fresh loaf of bread, and a bottle of juice. He watched the cashier scan them, the beep 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 sounding like a victory march. When the total appeared on the screen, he didn't feel the usual spike of panic in his chest. He didn't have to count out coins or worry if his card would be declined. He reached into his pocket, pulled out one of the bills the stranger had given him, and handed it over. It was more than enough to cover the cost. He received a handful of change back, which he pocketed carefully. The cashier handed him his receipt and bagged his groceries. "Have a good day," the cashier said automatically, not really looking up. "You too," the old man replied. And he meant it. He really meant it. He picked up his plastic bags, the handles stretching tight with the weight of the good food, and walked back toward the doors. As he stepped back out into the parking lot, the sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky. The heat wasn't as brutal now, it was turning into the golden warmth of late afternoon. The old man walked toward the bus stop, his bags swinging by his side. He passed the cart corral where he had been standing just a little while ago. It was empty now. The carts he had struggled with were gone, used by other shoppers. The evidence of his hard labor had disappeared, just like that. But he didn't feel bitter. He looked at the spot and smiled a small, grateful smile. He realized that the stranger hadn't just given him money. The stranger had given him back his dignity. He had given him the feeling that he mattered. The money would feed him for weeks, yes, but the memory of that kindness would feed his spirit for the rest of his life. He reached the bench at the bus stop and sat down, setting his groceries beside him. He looked out at the busy road, watching the cars go by. He didn't know who the stranger was. He didn't know his name or where he came from. He didn't need to know. He just knew that in a world that often feels cold and uncaring, there was warmth to be found. You just had to be lucky enough to run into it. The old man closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the traffic, feeling the cool breeze on his face, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't worried about tomorrow. Tomorrow would take care of itself. Today, he was full, he was safe, and he was seen.